Welcome to the MindSpeaking podcast, where we talk about the human side of data. In other words, data, communication, and personal development. My name is Gilbert Eikelenboom. I'm driven by curiosity, and my aim is to spread insights that you can apply in your life starting today. So, let's do it. Let's start MindSpeaking. Today, the guest of the show is Ken Jee. He's the head of data science of Sports Consulting Group. They improve performance of athletes with data. Also, he's a content creator. He has a YouTube channel with over 200,000 data scientists who are a fan of his videos that help them in their data career. Next to that, Ken is the host of the podcast Ken's Nearest Neighbors. I love that name. He has a background in computer science with a master's in computer science and a concentration in AI and machine learning. Next to all of that, he's an adjunct professor at DePaul University. Ken is a former professional golf player, and he was using data to improve his game. He's telling about that in the episode. Also, he's sharing his 5-second moment in his life. He will tell you how to communicate with people who are less data-minded. He's talking about books and how he got so crazy good at learning new things. We discuss a bunch of topics, and as always, when I talk to Ken, we go a bit deeper. I learned a lot this episode, and I hope you enjoy it and take away as much as I did. Enjoy today's episode. Hi Ken, nice to see you again.
Great to see you too. How are things?
Really good, really good. I'm so happy to speak to you again. We've spoken a few times. I've been a guest on your podcast. Thank you for the invitation. And of course, I'm really curious and looking forward to turn the tables now to talk more about you, because I know you have a great message to share. And of course, I also want to know a bit more about your story, your backstory. But first, I want to talk about something else, because I know you like the book Start With Why. So today I also want to start with why. And in the introduction, I sum up so many things you're doing, and so many activities, so many professional things. I know you have a lot of hobbies. So why do you do all this? You live in Hawaii, you can chill on the beach the whole day. So why do you do everything?
It's a really good question. And first, thank you so much for having me on the show. I think for me, I realized at a fairly young age, I always wanted to be doing something. I always wanted to be pursuing something. I wanted to be striving towards something. And that for me is where I found enjoyment. It's where I found happiness, in the process of pursuit. When I'm bored, when I'm just sitting there, I think that those are valuable moments to absorb and to reflect and to think about the things that that give the pursuit meaning. But for me, I have to be constantly moving, because that's where I essentially find the most joy. Right? When I was playing golf competitively or professionally, I loved going to the driving range and just hitting balls and refining a craft, trying to improve a little bit every single day. And, of course, in college and during my earlier life, I spent a lot of time, and I enjoyed going out to bars and doing stuff like that and having more recreation. But I just didn't find as much meaning in that. I don't know if it was like what all tied it together towards a sort of unifying goal. But for me, just having something that I was striving for was what the fun thing was. It wasn't necessarily reaching that end product.
Right. So the incremental improvements also are very rewarding for you. And in the moment, playing golf, improving your game, using data to improve your game. And so tell us a bit about that, about golf and how your data journey started.
Yeah, so I was not interested in data or technology in the slightest throughout high school and throughout most of college. And it wasn't until I think it was my junior year of college, I sort of reached a stall in my competitive golf career, or wasn't exactly getting better. And at the same time, I was taking an economics course. And I saw how we could look at the data in economics and see trends and understand things. And this concept of a diminishing marginal return was really relevant to me. So if we spend a lot of time working on one thing, we're not going to get as good returns practicing that thing over and over as if we spend time on another category. So maybe I'm hitting a lot of iron shots. The amount I can improve in improving my iron game is going to lessen with time the more I focus on it. If I focused on a different area of my game, I might get a greater return. And across all those different categories of my performance, they might have different rates of return. So I could spend maybe a lot of time practicing my driving, and that would still produce greater returns than working on my chipping or something like that over the long run. So that to me was this groundbreaking paradigm shifting concept is, wow, I can like dedicate how I practice differently, and that can change how I perform in the long run. That eventually led me to start collecting more data on all my rounds. I wanted to see how I was performing on the different hole types. I wanted to understand the different areas of my game that I needed improvement. And that led me down this giant rabbit hole of golf statistics. And that laid the groundwork for my entire career going forward, actually. I really got excited in it, even after I stopped playing competitive golf. And it's essentially what I do for a living outside of the content creation stuff.
Awesome. And if you talk about diminishing marginal returns, how do you look at that in from a career perspective? Because if you want to start into the data field, right, there's a lot of time you need to spend on, analyzing data, working on your technical skills, working on communication skills. When do you know what is the moment to switch to a new category or to add a category to your existing skill stack?
Honestly, that's a question or a problem that I have not personally solved yet. But I think a good thing to do is to evaluate what skills you do have first, so you know what to work on. Right. So to me, I know that I have interpersonal skills. I quite enjoy, and I think I'm pretty good at public speaking, and I'm pretty good at the creativity side. I can tell a very good story. I also think I'm reasonably good technically. I'm by no means best of class there, but the combination of those two skills to me is fairly compelling for employability, for me to get more opportunities and whatever that might be. And so I see that the combined effort of those things is a lot more valuable than those skills individually by themselves. And I would look at sort of these compounding returns between two different assets or skill classes rather than, oh, I have to maximize on an individual category and then I have to work on something else. So, there's this idea that I took the GMAT a long time ago, right? And I did not great in the math section, actually. I think I was in like the 70th, 60th percentile, something like that. And then in the grammar section, or the reading and grammar, I was in I think it was maybe like 91st, 92nd percentile. And overall, I was in I think 90th percentile, right? The power of those combined returns is actually a lot greater than what you'd expect them to be together, right? I mean, I actually think I was in like the 89th percentile in reading and grammar, and overall it was higher total in aggregate, which I thought was very interesting. Right, the two categories combined make up more than just the two isolated.
I love the perspective also because fields are changing so rapidly, and I also believe that we can learn so much from seemingly unrelated categories, right? Unrelated topics. What's your take on that? Do you have any experience or knowledge in a field that seems to be unrelated with data but still benefits you as a head of data science or content creator? What do you think?
Well, we're both really passionate about this. So I see your bookshelf in the background. I've hidden all my books, but you know that I love to read a lot of nonfiction in the psychology and personal development realm. To me, understanding goal setting, understanding why we do certain things, why we pursue certain things is unbelievably valuable. And when managing people, when working with other people, striving to understand their motivations, their goals, and their perspective is always unbelievably valuable. So some would argue that that's a part of every single facet of life related to community building. But to me, those are just really interesting topics that I personally am always pursuing and trying to understand, but have obviously bled into my work. It helps me tell better stories. It helps me appeal to people's emotions, right? It also helps me to communicate better with individuals. On my podcast, I'm able to hopefully get to these really meaningful conversations rather than just sort of scratching the surface of what is, what's the best way to break into data, right? Or like these super high level questions. In every conversation I've had with you, we've gotten beyond that surface level and have talked about things that I deem to be significantly more meaningful than just, oh, this is a functional thing related to utility of this information projects me to do this activity, rather than this information prompts me to look more internally and evaluate and reconsider and progress my mentality and my philosophy forward.
I love that, and I would love to dive deeper into self-awareness and some things you've learned and what changed you. But you also touched upon storytelling, and you recommended me a book. I have it here. It's a book, Story Worthy, by Matthew Dix. I put the link in the show notes. It's a great book about storytelling, not necessarily about data, but I'm sure there are many lessons and ideas you can take into the data world or any world, basically. But one of the main themes of this book is it says that every great story is about a 5-second moment of our life. And the purpose of the story is to bring that moment to the greatest clarity possible. So we're talking about your story. So I'm very curious, what are some of the 5-second moments of your story, of your career?
That's a really good question. Honestly, the pivotal moment in my story happened in 20, I believe it was 2011. No, it was 2010. And so I was in college. I was kind of coasting along. I was pretty much a C student. Didn't know any direction, where I wanted to go, what I was interested in pursuing. And, I wake up pretty hungover. I think it was a Saturday morning. No, it was in the middle of the week. It was like a Wednesday morning. I don't know why I was hungover on a Wednesday, but to a call from my dad, right? And I thought it was a little weird. Usually I call my dad and it's later in the day. And he picks it up and he says, "Ken, I don't know how to tell you this. Your cousin passed away." So my cousin was a year older than me, the closest person to me in the entire world. And without any warning, he was, he had a freak heart attack at 21 years old. And that day I went out. I didn't know what to do. I went to the golf course. I just hit balls mindlessly. I just walked around. I contemplated my entire existence. And I realized that if I wasn't pursuing something, if I was just coasting by, if I was just in life and riding the wave, I wasn't going to make anything of my life. And my case study right there, my cousin passing away just a year older than me, suggested that, it could all be gone the next day and I wouldn't have made any mark. I wouldn't have done anything. I wouldn't have like found meaning or pursued anything, which is what I find a tremendous amount of meaning in. And from that moment on, I went from a C student to basically a straight A student. I went from kind of dabbling and not giving my all in golf to really pursuing it professionally. I went from being someone who was letting life sort of live me to someone that took control of my life and made decisions that I thought were best for the short term as well as for the long term. And honestly, I think the broader story in that is obviously something terrible happened, right? I wouldn't wish for that to happen again, even though I've had a tremendous amount of positive life changes from it. But the fact that I was able to transform my life in virtually a week, I was a different person a week after that happened than I was before, is unbelievable and unbelievably inspiring to anyone, right? I mean, I was this person that didn't care, that was apathetic to everything, and something in me lit up, something in me transformed in a very short period of time that kickstarted the journey to who I am today.
Wow. Great story. Thanks so much for sharing that. And you mentioned that you transformed in that week and you're playing golf, hitting balls. In that week, did you speak to a lot of people? Were you really by yourself? Did other people help you in that transformation? How did that go?
So in terms of transformation, I should be clear. My mindset completely transformed in that week. I felt like I had something very meaningful to live for, rather than I was just exploring and just there and was just cruising, right? I I'm who I am now is very different from who I was then, even after that transformation in that period of time. I don't remember talking to too many people. I mean, there weren't too many people that could relate to my situation at school. I obviously talked to my dad quite a bit. I talked to my family. But what I really started doing after that period of time is I started reading unbelievably aggressively. I read so many different books on designing your life and personal philosophy. One of the ones that really made a true impact on me was Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. That one is sort of a complete audit of your life. It's something where you go in and you reevaluate a lot of your preconceived notions. You understand what your value system is, and you try to use those to pivot you towards your goals and the things that you'd like to achieve. And that idea that I wasn't fixed in space, the idea that I could change my mind, the idea that I could change my career and my philosophy and my trajectory, that I learned through those books, was so empowering to me that I wouldn't say I got addicted, but I really doubled down, and I wanted to learn more. I mean, I found something so powerful in books at the time where someone, take Tony Robbins, he could distill years, decades of experience and learnings into a book that I could read in a week. I could get someone's entire life story, basically all of their condensed valuable knowledge, in a couple hours if I learned to read really fast. To me, that was such a life-changing experience. And I hated reading in school. Up until college, I probably never read a book, like a full book, page, cover to cover. I would SparkNote it. I would do everything I could not to read it. And from then on, I said, wow, this is such a valuable resource for information. There's so much there that I can tangibly use to impact my life. How was I not doing this before? And essentially, the rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah, yeah. I love your passion for reading. I share that passion, and for me it was the same. I didn't read in high school. I only read what I had to read, right? Until I discovered some of the books you're describing as well, and it kicked off a new chapter. And some people say that personal development books are, I don't know, a bit shallow or cheesy. What's your opinion on that?
I think some of them are, without a doubt. I really like to read the diversity, like a wide breadth of them, because you can then pick and choose what you think is cheesy or not cheesy, meaningful or not meaningful. And I also don't think that they're particularly difficult to read. Usually they're pretty light. They try to make it fun. That's one of the ways that they differentiate. So it's not this really dense, rich cognitive task that you have to do. And a lot of the times it's reinforcing some of the same messages. It's nice for me to have those reminders constantly. So, of course, there are books that are going to be cheesy. They're going to be over the top, that are going to be maybe even counterproductive. But I think the vast majority of people writing these books is there to help you, is to help you learn from their experiences. And I would say I generally focus more on the self-help space related to science, or like specific use cases. I recently read Never Split the Difference, which some would say, oh, that's a negotiation book, that's whatever it is. That to me is still in the category of self-help, right? You're building a skill. You're learning to negotiate or converse or build empathy better. Those are very valuable skills to me, for personal development, for self-help.
Yeah, it's a great book, not just for negotiations, but just in general, right? If you have not just a negotiation in a professional sense, but also if you have a angry spouse or girlfriend or whatever, how to not negotiate with them. But understand them better and understand your own impulses and emotions. So yeah, you
Yeah,
mentioned, yeah, go ahead.
it's funny, that book probably helped me more with podcasting than any book I've ever read,
Yeah, how?
because the way that you build rapport with your guest is one of the most important things. You have to make them feel comfortable. You have to make them want to continue talking. You have to make them want to expand on the things that they're talking about. And most of negotiation is just letting the other person talk and and making hypotheses about how they feel. So one of the big things in the book is labeling, right? So it's like, it seems like you're really interested in this conversation topic, and then someone that prompts someone to articulate how they actually feel about the topic. Another thing is like mirroring and saying some of the last couple of words that builds more of a connection. And then the last one I really liked is using specific types of questions. So questions with how or what, they prompt the other person to continue with a dialogue rather than just answering with a yes or no. So I think that there's so many things there, like little things like that, that have helped me improve my ability to connect with people in general.
And I think the fact that you name 3 lessons from the top of your head shows that you also remember stuff, right? And put it into action. How do you manage to?
I
Because
did just read the book last week, so
well, still there are books I've read, and still I struggle to come up with these kind of things from the top of my head, and I've been starting to take notes and slowing down my reading as well, just to take it in really in, instead of trying to read as many pages or books in a year. What are some of the things you do to make sure it's not just consumption, but actually new knowledge or action?
Oh, it's interesting. I actually have almost the opposite approach, where I try to read a lot of books, but I try to make it so many of them have parallel themes. So rather than me just like memorizing what's relevant in a specific book, I find if a theme is reinforced for me multiple times, that's how I remember it. So, some of the why questions, the conversation things. Another book I read called Captivate by, I think it's Vanessa Van Edwards.
Yes, that's right.
She talks about those things and pulling on threads and how to make an interesting conversation with essentially anyone. So I think for me, there's conscious overlap in a lot of the things that I read, and if multiple people who are well studied, that care about these topics are talking about similar concepts, then it's probably worth remembering, and I naturally am more inclined to take note.
Yeah. Do you like the ideas of Naval Ravikant? Because he is also very much into science and also maybe personal development or investing or improving yourself, becoming happier. So maybe also in the personal development category and very science-based or science-focused. What's your take?
Yeah, I love his work. I read the Navalmanak. So someone essentially went through and took all of his tweets, all of his, I think he basically transcribed podcasts he was on, and took all of the highlights from what Naval talks about, and I really enjoyed. I think that he gives off this sort of whimsical philosopher vibe, which I think it might be a little overplayed. It's like, oh, Naval is this guy who's just like he's beyond us. I think we have to remember he's human too, and he's constantly learning. But the things that he says, the insights that he provides, are unbelievably valuable. But a lot of the times, he's just recycling things, and he does reference where he got his information from. But he is, in my mind, one of the great consolidators of our time. He's so well read. He understands all these different philosophies, and he's able to take those, combine them, wrestle with them, and regurgitate things that are insightful and impactful.
Yeah. I think his lessons, the ideas he shares, are very interesting because he combines ideas from various fields again, right? It's about leverage, how to build a business. And I read the book 3 weeks ago in Uganda, or rather, I listened to it because the roads in Uganda are rather bumpy, and it's impossible to read a book without becoming nauseous. But I really enjoyed it, so yeah, it's a book I would recommend as well. And Naval also talks about self-awareness, and you mentioned it before. I'm curious, how do you become more self-aware, or what have you seen in the last 10 years? What changed?
The single biggest self-awareness hack, or the single biggest thing that has changed my self-awareness, is having podcast conversations with people. Because when I hear someone else talk, when I hear about their story, I start to bounce my own story off of that. What would I have done in this situation? How do I feel about the way that they approached this? Would I have made the same decision as they did given the same circumstances? Or, there's so many sparks firing in my brain when I'm having these conversations. The best way to reflect is essentially with a mirror, or from these case studies where you're understanding these different examples, or you're evaluating, your role playing in your brain. And I've learned a tremendous amount about myself from just having those conversations. People also ask you questions. So when I'm prompted and I'm caught off guard, or there's that moment of like, oh, kind of, oh shoot, what do I do? You start to really get honest with yourself at a certain point in time. I also meditate quite a bit. I think that that's really important. I journal, I write things down. If a thought comes to me, I really just focus on it and try to make space rather than always just looking at my phone all the time, which is becoming harder and harder. But I think one of the most valuable things that you can do is just give yourself time to think. Something, I grew up as an only child, and
High five.
my entire childhood,
High five is it? Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, I was used to spending time alone. I get around a lot of people, and they're scared of their own thoughts. They're scared to be alone. They always need someone around. And I think it's very difficult to find happiness if you're uncomfortable without silence, you're uncomfortable with silence, you're uncomfortable with just hearing your own thoughts and being in a room by yourself. Boredom is a different thing, but discomfort with your mind is the scariest thing for me, because I genuinely, I'm very extroverted, but I still enjoy time to myself, because it's was my baseline for quite a long time when I was growing up.
Yeah. So you enjoy time by yourself. I think if we look at many data scientists, data analysts, people working in the data space, people that have an analytical mind according to themselves, many people say, yeah, those people are not as good socially. And you are, but I know there's this stereotype that people are not, right? People that work in data. On the other hand, self-awareness is a big component of getting along well with other people, because you need to understand yourself. Do you think this is something I'm coming up right now? So I'm curious if you agree that analytical thinkers, people in data, do you think they're good at analyzing themselves better than other people, other type of thinkers or feelers?
That's a really good question. So what I just described is that I understand myself in two ways, right? Through introspection and through conversation. And through collaborating with other people or talking with other people, I'm able to shape my opinions of different things. I have so many more examples to understand how I would feel about things. When you're purely analytical, you're just looking internally, and you can only evaluate on what you feel. So I think that analytical people, this is a mass generalization, perhaps focus more on internal understanding, just looking at what's going on inside of them, and they're not quite as attuned to what's going on outside of them, playing multiple scenarios, understanding how the world works as they interact with it. And I think for me that's why perhaps some analytical people aren't quite as effective at communication, is because they are only evaluating, hey, I would like to be communicated this way. This is my personal how I like receiving information and whatever it might be, rather than realizing that there's a breadth of how different people like to be interacted with. Something that is always present to me is, so you have a big zit on your forehead, right? You go out and you think everyone is looking at it. But if you flip that around and you start looking around, do you ever notice when people that you've never met before have a giant zit on their forehead, unless it's taking up their entire face? No, you don't. Right? And so this idea that we are hyper aware of our own circumstances when even other people don't really care about it is a perfect example of what I'm just describing. Right? We're over evaluating on what we feel and not interacting with the world enough and observing it for what it is to see that really a lot of the time other people don't care what you feel individually.
Yeah, exactly. I think it even has a name, the spotlight effect. So I think it's something almost everyone suffers from, and almost everyone lives in their head every now and then and doesn't make space. And you say you do, and it becomes more difficult, you're saying, staying away from your phone in this age of distraction, as I always call it. What are other obstacles in getting to know yourself?
So obviously we'd mentioned technology. That for me is the single largest one. Also, the one that's facing me a lot right now is good opportunities. So we always think about, I have so much stuff to do, but there's so many things that I want to do, right? And if I want to do so many things, I'm very busy. And if I'm very busy, I don't make time for myself. And so sometimes it's really important to say no to good things, to make way for great things, but also make time for yourself and your development, and to reevaluate. I'm reading this book Essentialism right now, which talks a lot about that. I've also in terms of parallel books, I read The One Thing, which was a transformative book for me as well, which is essentially like narrowing scope and focusing down. But I think the same philosophies associated with cutting back on work or on focusing on just the select few things that are relevant. One of the most relevant things, or the most important things you can ever have possibly in your life, is your peace of mind and your personal understanding.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you make the choice? How do you evaluate whether you take on this additional project that you do enjoy, but might add to your, or adds to your workload and might cut down your time with yourself, time for self-awareness?
That's one I'm still figuring out. I'm in the process of scaling back quite a bit of the stuff I do right now, and it's like abandoning your children almost, in some sense, where there's the sunk cost fallacy where you put time in, or you see so much tremendous upside. One metric that I constantly fall back on is current utility versus the size of the tail of a project or an endeavor. So if I think something is going to bring me short-term enjoyment and also long-term payoff, those are the types of things that I will pursue wholeheartedly. If there's just long-term payoff, depends how good the payoff is and how much I have to sacrifice in the short term. If there's just short-term payoff, I almost try not to ever do those, unless it's food related. That is my only vice. So, yeah, I mean, that's generally the rating scale that I give things.
I like that idea. And how important is it? Because you work online, or you are a content creator, right? You have a successful YouTube channel. You do a lot. You also have online trainings. I know you also do live sessions, so presentations, workshops. How important is it for you to build something that is scalable? Because if you do a live session, that is great, but it's not very scalable. But it might be more fun to interact with people. What's your perspective on that?
I try to focus 80 to 90% of my work on scalability. And the goal for everything is to be as scalable as possible. I start a new business. The plan is to systematize it as quickly as possible. For YouTube, the plan is for me to make the effort of creating videos as low as possible, and the production quality and the value of the videos as high as possible. Those are always the longer term visions and goals. Does it always work out that way? Not necessarily. Um, to be perfectly honest, there are a lot of things that I do just to say that I could do them, and then I probably won't pursue them that many more times. So, for example, I gave a keynote speech about a month ago. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun, but the return on investment for me, even though I'm getting paid to speak, after I've done one keynote speech, I can say I'm a keynote speaker. Does, if I do 3, is that any different than doing 1 really? If I do 5, 10, is that really different than doing 1? Not really. There's massive diminishing marginal returns after the first one. And the amount of publicity, the amount of opportunities, the amount of these types of things that I get from doing something like that are dwarfed in comparison to the YouTube video that I make that gets a couple 100,000 views or something like that. And so why would I spend so much time preparing and pursuing one of those things after the first one if I can spend that same time and effort to make something that produces returns in perpetuity? So I probably will do more speeches just because I like them. And but at the same time, that's sort of how my mindset works, is that, okay, there's a lot of upfront costs for that with average return. Is it worth it to do it after getting a title of keynote speaker? I don't know the answer to that. Things on the other hand, like live panels where I get to talk with my friends for an hour and I get paid to do that, I will do those all the time because there's utility in having those conversations. The upfront cost is virtually nothing. I don't have to prepare for a panel. I just go talk. So, and it's something like this, right? I don't have to prepare for this necessarily. I get to come talk, hang out with you, one of my friends. And so the utility goes far beyond any financial or awareness or any of these types of gains that I could associate with these. So, that's generally how I approach almost all of my scheduling or live versus recorded scalable interactions.
Right. That's very insightful. Maybe not insightful to the audience, but at least very insightful to me, because right now this is something I'm trying to adopt, right? To focus more on scalability. I've been putting off, creating some automations and making myself more scalable, because I still don't have an online course. By the time this is out, I probably do. So maybe this is a commitment that I need to keep. But for me, it's hard to say no against a new project that bumps up if people invite me, and it's a very good opportunity, both in what I can learn and what I can bring and what I can earn. So So I think I either need to raise prices or say no more often. You also mentioned YouTube a few times, and I'm curious, if we go back to the beginning, do you remember creating your first YouTube video?
Yeah, so I made my first YouTube video for a class. I had a project, and one of the 2 ways we could submit it was either YouTube or Vimeo. And so I just put it on YouTube. I didn't realize you could make an unlisted video and share the link. I just put it up there. Didn't think about it for 3 months. And I look back and it had, I think it was like 1,000, maybe 2,000 views at the time. And to me, that was astronomical. I thought, wow, people are actually interested in watching content like this. And at that time, I wasn't a huge consumer of YouTube. I wasn't, I guess I would go there, I'd find some videos sometimes. But after that, I realized maybe there's an appetite for more storytelling. Maybe there's an appetite for me to tell a story to someone who was in a similar position to me maybe a year ago. And I started making videos, and it was history from there. I also really enjoyed it. I had so much fun making the video for my class.
Nice. So such a single video ends up into a whole YouTube channel. And You post on a regular basis. Where do you get the inspiration from?
So you say I post on a regular basis. Even the last month I've taken basically off. I finally posted my first new video in forever yesterday, which was actually very liberating to take a month off. I realized that I did some polling, looked at the data, and people are not super concerned with me posting regularly. They care most about the utility of the videos and what they get out of the individual video experiences. And that was a massive load off of me. But inspiration comes from talking with the community. Inspiration comes from just me thinking about what I would like to create and what I think would be interesting to the audience, and sort of finding a way to merge those two things. So, an exercise I do is I'll basically sit down. I used to do this more often and just write 10 ideas down on a piece of paper. I used to do this every day for business ideas. And you start to just train that creation muscle. And you start to snowball ideas in a very different way. You get more nuanced. You start to go down these rabbit holes. And honestly, the ideation process is one of the easiest parts. Probably the hardest part is the detail orientation and making sure that, for me, the story makes sense and people want to watch it all the way through. uh, those are where I think I'm really trying to focus.
Mm-hmm. And if you talk about storytelling in your YouTube videos, you've, of course, you've learned a lot about storytelling, how to tell a compelling story. How has that benefited you in your data career?
I mean, my data career tremendously. So for my work, I'd say about half of it is the actual analysis, and then half of it is conveying information, whether it's through PowerPoint slides, whether it's through talking people through what I've been working on. And I think that portion of the work is what single-handedly has made my work at my company successful. So we're delivering a lot of information to professional athletes, mostly people who do not have a business or a data background, and the ability to articulate things in terms that they understand is really important. And I have to be clear here. So these athletes, the people we work with, they're incredibly intelligent. They're just not necessarily versed in the same languages and tools that we use. So I have to think very creatively. How do I put all of this analysis in the same terms that they're familiar with, that they know better than anyone else? So talking in sports terms, talking in terminology that they really like their lexicon. And for me, that's been one of the most difficult things, but also the most rewarding things is being able to speak different languages within the English language.
Right, that makes sense. So speaking the language of those sports, the athletes, is one thing that helped you. Are there any other things that helped you, yeah, understand their world and step into their shoes and understand what they need, if maybe even at the beginning of the process, right? Because now we're talking about presenting your work, but maybe in the beginning phase where you talk with them and understand what they need and how they currently measure their performance or how you can help them. Is there anything else you've learned you can share?
Yeah, so there's two things. So first, I did have a little bit of an advantage because I played a lot of sports at a high level. So there is that implicit trust that's associated with that. Something that we tried really early on is asking for feedback. And the funny thing is that if you're so far out of familiarity with data or the business side, you really don't know what feedback to give because it's all pretty new to you. So you don't necessarily know how to articulate what would be better when it's all in the realm of the unknown. And to me, that was really interesting as well. How do you get better if there isn't a mechanism to tell you what direction to go? And so we started iterating, we started prototyping and trying different things and putting that out there to give a lot of the people that we work with a baseline. So we could say, do you like this reporting style better than this reporting style? Do you like when it's communicated this way rather than this way? And that helped us to be able to frame exactly or closer to what what they would be interested in seeing, what would be most valuable to them. And it also gave us the opportunity to show our capabilities, the different things that we could produce. So I think that there's a really interesting lesson in there, is that like a lot of people, they don't know what they want until they see it. It's very different when a lot of, from what the business textbooks and whatever it is, whatever it says, like, oh, listen to your customer, they'll tell you exactly what they want, whatever it is. No, there's unarticulated needs that are out there, and sometimes the only way to tease those out is to look at behavior, is to prototype and try different things and experiment.
Right. I think it's something that happens very often, is that people create something and not really communicate or check or get feedback, and then present something that is not desirable or that people don't want. Or maybe they said they want that, but you don't really check it in the middle. So yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk to you about is, what are your favorite ways to learn? Because you mentioned books, but what other ways do you learn?
So I would be a hypocrite if I didn't say that I did online learning and YouTube and those types of things. I think that watching video is a really compelling way for a lot of people to consume information and to get an overarching sort of umbrella knowledge for things. I try to do as much hands-on stuff as I can. So if I wanted to learn how to knit, I would go knit. I would watch a couple videos and then get my hands dirty. And I think that process is pretty valuable for almost anything you approach. I mean, for the last almost year now, I've been training jujitsu pretty consistently. That's something I've been unbelievably excited about. It sort of works my mind and my body at the same time. And the process that I use is essentially I will watch a bunch of YouTube videos. I will go train and try to implement it in practice or drilling. Then I will go and try and implement it in like a more, they call it a role in jiu-jitsu, where you're it's more competitive. You're not trying to hurt the other person, but it's like a match. And then afterwards, I will take notes on what I could improve upon. I will sit there and meditate, which has been shown to help improve the rate of consuming information. And then I will do it all over again for anything I'm trying to pursue and keep up to date. And so I think that process sort of articulates how any learning process could work. Is right. You try to get some overall understanding. You learn the specifics by actually doing it and toying with it. You see how it works in the real world. Then you observe, get feedback, and then you sort of contemplate it a little bit, and then go through the cycle all over again. And after you've quote unquote learned a move, you don't have to necessarily watch all the YouTube videos on it again. You can drill it. You can practice and toy with it, and you can apply it when you're competing and when you're doing it in a real world scenario consistently. And that's how you sort of build up that memory or that comfort with it.
You also mentioned video, and watching videos can certainly help. I'm wondering, do you think VR has a role here in learning new skills or learning new things?
I mean, I think it absolutely could. I think I'm open to any medium that could be valuable. My main concern with VR is that it's so immersive that we're sort of giving up a lot more of just our space, that more than just our like cognition to it, right? So once you're in VR, you're a lot more prone to look at notifications because they pop up right in front of your face. You're a lot more tempted by the games that are also on your VR headset. I have an Oculus, and I try to use it as sparingly as possible, because once I go in, I'm just completely, I'm looking all over the place. It's so fascinating to me. I'm actively trying to get less involved with technology, even though I make content online essentially for a living. But I wouldn't write off any technology for learning. I would just look at the other side of it and say, could this also be detrimental in some way?
Right. And I think very often the answer is yes, in my experience. If I look at my own habits of using my phone, my laptop, it's so hard to push them away. So addicting.
Yeah, unbelievably addicting. And that, I mean, that to me is the scariest thing. Is I didn't have a cell phone until I think it was high school or something, right? Or what we would consider a modern smartphone. And I see kids who are like, you know, 7, 8, 10 with cell phones now, and it's one of those things where I look at my technology viewing behavior and I'm conscious of, wow, I'm addicted to this. But there's no conscious addiction with kids that age. It's just how things are. It's just, it's what they're used to. And to me, that's even scarier, is when you have this addiction and you're unaware of it, or you have this compulsion to do something and you're unaware of it. I mean, I'm very interested to see what the implications are of that in the longer term.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the interesting thing or scary thing is that the research doesn't exist, right? We don't have the data yet. I would like to ask some quick questions to you, to also give some more background in your life. So yeah, here we go. Rapid fire round. The first question,
Let's do it.
yeah, is what's one thing that surprises people about you?
That I'm not as tall as I appear online.
How tall are you?
Like 5'8", 5'9". But I think based on my presence and my personality, people expect that I'm larger than life.
Yeah, I did expect larger than life even. Second question, what is your favorite place to travel?
I think I'm here. So growing up, I would always travel to Hawaii, and I guess I live here now. So I'm trying to think of anywhere I would prefer to travel to, and I can't really think of any right now. Maybe one of the other islands in the short term.
You should have said Amsterdam.
I should have,
But
but I've never been, so I can't.
yeah.
I can't. So
You can't say
when
it's
I
your
do
favorite
come,
one. Maybe in a year.
yeah, exactly.
So the third question is, will you live in Hawaii the rest of your life?
No, I'm actually planning to move back to the mainland United States. It's not 100% certain, but I'm eyeing Utah pretty heavily.
All right. Why Utah?
A lot of really good outdoors. There's a good community there. Those are two main ones. I love skiing. I love, there's just a really solid community when I went and visited recently.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, last question. What job would you be terrible at?
Terrible at? Oh, that's an interesting one. So my girlfriend is what's known as a applied behavioral analyst, and so she works with like neurodiverse children to help them improve their interpersonal skills. And I don't think I could do her job. I think people who work with children are absolute saints. I love kids, but in time boxed increments that I have control over. I plan to have children one day and those types of things, but to work in that environment every day is really 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 awesome, and something I have a tremendous amount of respect for.
Yeah, me too. So last questions. First of all, we talked a lot about we had quite a deeper conversation about a lot of different things, about learning, about books, about your business, about YouTube, about data, about your career, about your 5-second moment. So for me, I'm really happy with the episode already, talking selflessly here. But what is one big takeaway you want listeners to get from this episode?
I think the biggest thing for me is, I alluded to it in my 5-second moment. I didn't realize this was so deeply ingrained in my mind and in my life, is that you really do have the power to instigate change in your life if you make the decision to, or you realize that you have the power to. I think taking control over a lot of the things in your life is one of the most valuable and meaningful things that you can do. And the only thing that's truly holding you back from doing that is yourself or your preconceived notions about who you are. And so reevaluating who you are, looking introspectively, looking at who you are through interacting with other people, those are the ways that you can evaluate where you stand and where you potentially want to be.
Powerful ending. Thank you very much, Ken. Where can people connect with you, follow you? Of course, your YouTube channel. Go check it out, because I'm a fan, and many, many more. So where can people find you?
So YouTube is probably the best place. My podcast, Ken's Nearest Neighbors, Gilbert has been an incredible guest there as well. On LinkedIn is another good place. I think those are the three main ones that I'm most up to date with. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, but I try to limit my presence and my scrolling there as much as I can.
Fantastic. I'll put the links in the show notes so people can find you there. Again, it has been truly a pleasure talking with you. Every time we talk, I learn something, and I took notes myself as well. Maybe you've seen if you're watching video. So I learn new stuff, and I'm sure the listeners have learned new things as well. And I really enjoyed talking with you again, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
I learned so much from you as well, and I'm 100% going to steal your 5-second moment for one of my podcast episodes. I really, really like that, being able to sort of refine everything down to a very small thing. Like, what are you all about? That's such a cool thing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ken, and let's speak soon.
Amazing.
All right. Bye-bye. Cheers to Hawaii. Do you want people to listen to your data and increase your business impact? Then take my free email course or do the quick self-test of your data communication skills. Go to mindspeaking.com and start learning today.